Hello and welcome to the start-finish straight of the Silverstone racing circuit here in the UK, and today I'm finally getting my hands on the wonderful BAC Mono. So without further ado, we're going to take a walk and talk around this car, and then most importantly, I'm finally going to get to drive this in the dry. Hopefully. And so here we have it, the latest iteration of the BAC Mono. I say latest because it originated life as I guess I could class it as a narrow-bodied car. They did actually increase somewhat of the elbow room in the Gen 2 car. But importantly, what BAC have done with this iteration of the Mono is increased the engine size from 2.3 to the 2.5 litre engine, which is now generating 305 brake horsepower, and it only weighs 580 kilograms dry. So the power to weight ratio is phenomenal. I can't wait to take you guys for the experience of the drive shortly. But let's just run you through some of the fabulous features of this car. This has been approached entirely differently compared to a lot of the cars that you might associate with lightweight track focused British made cars which are also out there. But first of all, engine. It's a 2.5 litre, as I mentioned, upgraded from the original 2.3 setup which they had in the first generation Monos. A Mountune racing engine. It's based on a Ford Duratec, but it is specifically made for BAC. This is not an off-the-shelf engine. It's been created for this wonderful car, and I shall share with you the driving characteristics of that once we get out on track. The approach that BAC have had to developing this car is pure engineering porn. It is beauty every inch of the way. It's absolutely gorgeous. What I particularly love about it is just how exposed a lot of the working components are. For example, the gearbox. Now, the housing on this is bespoke to the Mono, but the internals of it are in fact a Formula 3 gearbox. It's a Hewland straight cut box. It sounds pretty aggressive when it's out on track, but while the car is designed and made in the UK, it's not to be confused with your average British built track day car. It's really hard to explain until you get up close to it. From afar, obviously it looks abstract. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to witness. I mean, I remember when I first spoke to BAC back when they were based in Cheshire, the design inspiration and cues which they referenced back then were everything from fighter jets to Bjork music video, which had some abstract sculpture in it, which influenced the design of the car. And as a result, what you get is something that looks stunning, is durable and practical, but so beautifully built. For example, and we were referencing earlier the exposed parts. I love how you can see the push rod suspension exposed through the bodywork of the car. When this rolls back into the pits, you can actually see these things moving. It's so good. It almost feels organic. It looks alive because you can see the components moving. Now, despite the fact that we are on a track, and I did just mention rolling back into the pits, what makes this car unique is that it is a single-seater with number plates. You could attack country roads, you could drive it to the Alps, and then you can drive it all the way here to Silverstone and pretty much dominate everything else on track outside of a fully fledged GT3 racing car. The performance on this, it does have a power to weight ratio slightly greater, I believe, than even the Bugatti Veyron, and that's what you get with 305 horsepower weighing just around about 580 kilograms. But look at it, every body panel on this car, they've really upped the game over the years in terms of the customization that clients can opt for when they spec their cars. While the car isn't based on a carbon tub, it does have a space frame, you would be forgiven for thinking so, because the amount of exposed carbon elements of the car, I mean, look at this. It's so formula in its approach. It's absolutely stunning. So there is also the optional extra of 17-inch Dimag carbon wheels. It's actually the rim, the outer rim, which is carbon. They still have a billet alloy center, but not only do they look stunning, but they contribute further to weight saving, even down to the little detail on these titanium wheel bolts here, they have their logo just etched on the wheel. And these are the details you don't really pick up on until you get really close on the car. The carbon wheels actually save 2.5 kilograms per corner, so an overall weight saving of around 10 kilograms, which on a car that's already incredibly light is actually a massive saving. And there's now the option for composite brakes. So if you really want to go all out on this, you can really start shedding weight. If you opt for the composite brakes, it saves a further 20 kilograms. I mean, that's big weight saving on a normal car. When you read specs on conventional road-going track day cars, people quote figures like that as if it's a big deal. These guys are shaving 30 kilograms on a car that already weighs just over 550 kilograms just on the brakes and the wheels. Now let's go inside this, because it's inside where things get really tasty. Okay, so inside the car, normally I'm used to putting a GoPro on a windscreen and then pointing it inside to show you what I'm talking about. This being an open-top single-seater car, we're going to take a unique angle. But let's talk about that they've made the interior slightly wider. I know it doesn't look like it. I had the privilege of driving the Generation 1 chassis, which was actually quite a tight fit. But what they've done is scalloped away the interiors here, leaving room for a phone, no less. So in here, you can actually store some of your personal belongings, but importantly, there's just more elbow room and general comfort for if you're spending some more time in the car. Going back to the bespoke nature of speccing this car, the customer can have the seat fitted to them, very much like in Formula One. You go for a session with BAC and they'll mold it to you and get it fitted to exactly as you would like it. And that goes down as well. If I put you down here, look, there's nothing cooler than a floor mounted pedal box. It is so race car. Even the stuff you don't see is beautiful, and I think that says a lot about the ethos of this brand. Everything is beautifully crafted. I mean, look at the exposed carbon weave and the paint, where it goes from exposed carbon back to the paint again, and just everything's so beautiful. And then we need to talk about this steering wheel, because this is where things get really trick, very formula, and extra awesome. So just like the seat, you can have the grip molded to your hand. It just really becomes very tailor-made and specific to you. I would go so far as to say more than any other car in a way, because with this being a single-seater car, it really is entirely about you, hence the name Mono. Now, over the years, these guys have evolved the tech in the car somewhat, so they now have launch control and auto upshift. The interesting thing about the launch control is that you can program it to launch the car however you want. So you can do a full-on, flat-out 8,000 RPM clutch dump launch, or you can launch it nice and sedate and just chill and, you know, just get optimum traction for when you're leaving the traffic lights, for example. And auto upshift, this now allows you to effectively put the car in auto, and it will shift at the optimal RPM, or on track, the red line. So if you're focusing on learning a new track or new lines, you don't have to worry about the gears until you're familiar with it, and you can just extrapolate the most out of the car. Very cool. And then for me, things get extra sexy when we turn it over. Look at this. Oh, it's so beautiful. What I'll show you when I eventually get in the car is how gorgeous everything on the screen is. When you turn it on, it really does feel like you're in something from a Formula series. It's very cool. Once again, everything is custom built to you. The owner of this particular car has had his initials painted on the carbon here. He's had it fitted to his hands, which is super cool. And you have all of the instrument cluster, which comes alive once you slide it on the steering column. Speaking of which, I think we should probably go and drive this down that straight.
As you can imagine, you have a single-seater, open-topped car. The first run, even with a lav mic up the helmet, the wind noise just blows it right out. So, I'm going to walk and talk you through the circuit in the car and the experiences that I'm encountering as we hit various corners, and, you know, just recalling the moment of rolling out of the Silverstone pits in this incredible car. In order to put it into gear, you actually do depress a clutch, then you put your left hand on the green neutral button, which you can see just there, and then you pull the upshift with your right hand, and that initiates gears. It's not until you're around about 3,000 RPM that you can change gears without having to use the clutch, and after then, it's just basically a sequential box, and you're just smashing the gears up and down. It's incredible. So, off onto the track. Now, interestingly, with this car, the engine is bolted directly to the chassis. So when you're going quite slowly, when you're rolling out of the pits, and even up to around about 60 odd miles an hour, there's a lot of vibration through the chassis. It's not until you're up here now in the 90 mile an hours that the engine and the chassis find this wonderful frequency where everything just sort of clicks, and all of a sudden you're in this operating band. I actually strangely liken it to being on a jet ski, dragging until you get up to a certain speed and then it begins to plane. That's what the Mono feels like. So we're coming down this straight now. Get up to around about 130 miles an hour at this point, which is actually slow. Don't forget, this is my first outlap in this car. You realise straight away that the braking is incredible, particularly with these composite brakes and the fact that the car is so lightweight. There's just the slightest dab, it sheds off loads of speed, and the turn-in is ridiculous. Now this car is fitted with Mono's new custom-made slicks, which they've been developing for some time now, and the lateral grip and the confidence that it gives you in the car, particularly later on in the laps when you finally got some heat in the tyres, I just couldn't believe it. Now, one of the interesting things I found was that the car is very good at disguising its speed, as I've been used to driving around Silverstone predominantly in a GT3, and all of a sudden the braking points are way later, your turn-in is so much faster, and the amount of speed you're carrying through is actually wonderfully disguised. It's not until you're being followed by something like a GT3 that you realise that the performance levels are stratospherically different. I had a latest generation Porsche Gen 2 991 GT3 RS that was right up my behind as I was going down the straight. I wasn't flat out because I was still getting accustomed to the car, and it wasn't until, and I could see this guy's lights in my rear view mirrors, it wasn't until I hit the brakes and made it through my first set of corners that the Porsche had just vanished. The performance and pace of this car is breathtaking. It's a wonderful experience. It's important to benchmark this car, the Mono, against other cars that wear license plates, because after all, you can drive this on the road. If I wanted to, after this, I could put my road-going tyres on and drive home. I have reference points from my GT3 getting down the straight at around about 140 miles an hour, but the braking points are so vastly different, particularly with the new slicks on the Mono. It really does take some adjusting to at first if you're used to tracking a more conventional car, even if they are track bias cars. The way this thing goes, it really makes conventional track day cars look pretty slow. Don't forget, the speed of this thing is up there with a McLaren P1 GTR. It has a more impressive power to weight ratio than a Bugatti Veyron, and then of course when it comes to the corners, because it's so light and it has these newly developed slicks, the way that it carries its momentum through corners just leaves you scratching your head. What's great about it is it's not a car that you can just get in and exploit straight away. It does have a lot of characteristics that you learn as you go. Sadly, on the day I was driving, I only had a few laps, but a important sign of a great car for me is something that you step out of and it leaves you wanting more because you haven't quite mastered it yet. And this car feels exactly like that. I think the reward of being able to find the very edge of its limits and balance this thing to the point of it just being on the edge of letting go and trying to extrapolate the most performance you can from what is a very organic driving experience. It will be one of the most pleasurable driving experiences that you could have on track. So let's see where things go for BAC and the Mono with the experience on track in Silverstone. And when I say finally in the dry, because every time I get in this car it seems to rain, so I managed to have a dry lap today at Silverstone. I gotta say a massive thank you to the owner and to BAC for arranging it. So yeah, anyway, back to the pits.
So there you have it, helmet hair complete. That is my short but incredibly awesome time with the 2.5 litre BAC Mono. All that's left me is wanting a lot more. Hopefully we're going to get some more track time in these, or maybe road time. Some road time would be fascinating actually. But leave your comments below. Let me know what you want to see from these cars in the future. They are rare, they're hard to get hold of. But on occasion, when Mono have a track day, I come down, check it out. It's just been incredible. It's so much fun. I hope as well you appreciated the fact that I had to do a voiceover in car because it's pretty windy. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching. I shall see you next time. Ciao.